Hey there, it's your friend and fellow working mama, Karina O'Brien, here with you. Thank you so much for tuning in. And if this is your first episode, welcome. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. I'm so glad you're here. Today's episode is an absolute humdinger. It's a powerful one. I'm speaking with Professor Leah Ruppanner, a sociologist, gender equity champion, and a woman on a mission to change how we think about work, care, and the mental load. If you've ever felt invisible, overwhelmed, or wonder why you're carrying so much, this conversation is for you. Leah's insights are validating, refreshing, and might just change the way you move through motherhood and work. And hey, if you love this episode, please share it with another working mama who needs to hear it. And don't forget to rate and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify so we can keep growing this amazing community. Let's dive in. Welcome, Leah. Welcome to the Working Mama podcast. How is your day going so far?
Thank you very much for having me. Delighted to be here. My day is great. Thank you very much for asking.
So, Leah, as we were just having this really great chat off before we started recording, I have stalked you and known about your work for such a long time. You're probably one of my guests that it was probably my top 10, but probably a little bit of imposter syndrome to actually invite you on. I know a bit about you, but do you want to just tell everyone who you are, your career journey, and what led you to the work that you're doing today?
Okay. First, I love this introduction. So thank you very much for boosting my ego. It's a great way to start the day. My name is Leah Ruppanner. I'm a professor of sociology at the University of Melbourne. I run the Future Work Lab. I'm one of the founding directors of the Future Work Lab at the university there, and I run the Gender Equity Initiative. I also, because maybe your listeners are interested, I have a podcast, Misperceived, where I talk about all of the lies we tell each other around gender-based, and how do we help people use research to understand their lives. In terms of my journey, I never thought I would be in Australia. I'm obviously not from this country, if you can hear from my accent. I've been here for 13 years, and this was never on my radar, but it's been such a blessing and a gift. And I feel like I couldn't have had the career in the US where I am from. I couldn't have done it. So I feel very grateful for being here in terms of the love, support, kindness, and the interest in gender issues that exist here that I think allow my work to shine. But I didn't know, I guess I kind of always knew I wanted to be an academic. Well, I shouldn't say that. In university, when I started university, I kind of had an inkling that I wanted to do this. And then, I got a PhD at the University of California, Irvine, and I studied housework there. And then I started looking for a job. I was unexpectedly pregnant. I was finishing my PhD. I got a job that started out paying me $45,000, which even when I told the students how much I made, they looked like depressed for me, which meant it really was not a lot of money. Right, with a kid and a new baby on the way, and a husband who was looking for a job because we moved from my job. And so I have always loved this work and felt committed to the work. But I think sometimes my life has a lot of ups and downs and bumps and journeys for you that make it a little bit challenging to be a working mother in particular, and keeping yourself kind of aligned with where you're heading in terms of your goals, dreams, and ambitions. And I'll tell you, I never thought I would be here and saying these things to you, but I'm not going to say I'm lucky, because that's nonsense women say. I'm going to say that I'm grateful that opportunities emerged that allow me to step in and do the work. So grateful to be in Australia, grateful to be running this lab, grateful to be doing the work, and that it's resonating with people, or I should say it a different way, I'm able to capture the experiences of women and men and showcase them back in a way where people feel seen, they feel heard, they feel understood, and they feel like, wow, someone actually is capturing how I'm feeling with the words I maybe couldn't have identified before. So this is, I think, my purpose in this world. So I got you. I got you all. Let
That's
me know how I'm
amazing.
doing.
Yeah.
Let me know how I'm doing.
Look, because so much of your work as well around, the household studies, I guess, is what you originally did, is also around the mental load.
Yeah.
And that's also where I think I first came across you as well. What is your definition of the mental load? Because there's so many different thoughts and we kind of know what it is, but really it's hard to, I guess, put into a little box as well. And it's something that always comes up for particularly working mums or mothers, and they'll say, I'm burnt out. The mental load is just exhausting. So, what is it and why is it such a topic, particularly for women? Men don't seem to be complaining about the mental load.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. But I'm just going to do like a million plugs, but here I go again. So I have a book coming out next year. It's called Drained, How to Lighten Your Mental Load to Do Less and Be More. And it's in part in response to kind of this bigger question of like, what is the mental load? And I'll tell you, I'm going to redefine it for you. So I'm going to tell you, as this book comes out, I can't tell you everything yet, but there's really 8 different types and there's 7 different stages. And I'll help people actually get the language about what's going on and why I feel so heavy and why, and I promise I'll give you a solution. But the impetus for this was really that we had this article that I wrote with colleagues, Liz Dean and Brendan Churchill at the University of Melbourne, where we were trying to actually ask that question of like, what's the difference between the mental load and say like housework or the emotional work that women do? So there's a bunch of different types of work you do every day when you get up. You might do paid employment at work or paid employment at home. You might do unpaid domestic labor in the home, like housework and childcare. You might do some emotional labor. So academics have talked about all these different types of labor that we do, right? You might do some emotional labor where you're either creating a kind of an emotion in yourself that you have to present to the world. You're bringing it into your workplace. You're bringing it with your family. Kind of like when you have to push your feelings down and mask and still show up in a way that's positive. Sometimes you shouldn't push your feelings down, but sometimes you have to. And emotional labor of like kind of checking in on people, making sure their emotional tempo is okay. And then there's this thing called like cognitive labor and the mental load. And one of the arguments that cognitive labor is like, sorry, the professor is still in. Just give me one more minute on that. And cognitive labor is like thinking work. It's this, and you can do cognitive labor everywhere, right? Like you can do cognitive labor for your family. You can do cognitive labor at work, and you might do some of this stuff in different domains. And so we wrote this article that was published in 2019, where we basically said the mental load is really when you have that that thinking work that you're doing that's highly emotional. And that's why it feels so heavy. Like it's that emotionality of it that makes it feel really, really heavy and burdensome. And so, yeah, you can be, and I think this is why some of the solutions that we have are some of the solutions that families deploy, in particular for the domestic mental load, is like, yeah, we can have a shared calendar and we can have a shared list, but somehow the mental load doesn't disappear.
No.
Well, yeah, because you're solving the cognitive labor question, right? Like you're solving
that's on the
like,
cognitive side. Yep.
You don't have a mental load solution. You actually have a cognitive labor solution. And the reason why the mental load is so pernicious, I think, and I'm trying to really get this with the data, but I think the mental load is that kind of precursor to burnout. Like it's like your mental load spikes and then it is a contributor to burnout, is because it's emotional, and it's emotional for mothers. So it's emotional. I won't say but it's emotional for mothers. We've done interviews of about 150 parents, men and mothers and fathers, but it has this emotionality piece that I think is why it can be so draining. I could just keep talking about, I'm going to keep going, but then you just have to stop.
I love it. Go. We're all going. Yes, that's us.
Okay. So that's why it feels so draining. So one of the things, I'll just talk about one more research project that we did. So that was like a theoretical piece where we were saying like, hey, this is what's going on is you're doing all these different types of labor, and sometimes you're doing cognitive labor, and maybe that's really easy to share with your partner or not. I don't know, question mark, but sometimes that might be easy for you because you can knock it off your list. Sometimes you're doing the emotional labor, checking on the family, right? Making sure, checking all that. But it's when you that thinking work, that cognitive labor that's emotional, that's where you're having the mental load. We don't have a good measure of it, and we're trying to capture it. In addition to that, Anna Weeks, who's at the University of Bath, we had a study that just got published last year and then was featured on the Today Show, which was quite cool.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Thank you. And basically what Anna had done is she collected all this data through it's her data, and she did this through PhD, but had a representative sample of people asking them like, what do you carry? What do you do? And the thing with the mental load is 2 people might be doing it simultaneously, right? You actually could have 2 people carrying the same mental load. So it's not like in the family, your mental load is going to be 50-50. Very, very rarely are you duplicating maybe housework, although sometimes in our interviews, we hear parents saying that they are. A woman will go back in and rewash the dishes if their husband or partner hasn't done it right. Like knock that off. That's a duplication of labor.
Wow. Yep.
But the mental load, everyone can be carrying it. 2 people can be carrying it simultaneously. So you can actually have duplication in the mental load and not even know you do. So the reason I'm saying this is we found that actually out of the tasks that we asked people about, women carried 70% of them and men carried 40. And so
Mm.
this is again, this indication, like part of the reason why mothers are feeling so burnt out, I think it's two things, right? Like it is that emotional element that is emotional, and they are carrying a heavier load, especially around kids and then in the domestic area. They just are. That's shown in a range of different studies. It doesn't mean that men aren't carrying some of it. It just means that they're not carrying the same share.
As a much. And yeah.
Exactly.
And I guess women as well emotionally probably are there for kids in that sense as well. So you're carrying the emotions and generally, right, okay, school drop off pickups and activities and things like that, because you're also managing the emotions. Are they going to want to do this? Do they want to do it? What mood are they going to be in? And things like that. It's definitely, yeah, I really love how you're saying around the cognitive part, but also the emotional part. It's not always about just ticking off the list and doing the cards and things like that.
Yeah. And
And
if it
so,
was, it'd be easy to solve. It'd be
yeah,
easier to solve, right? That
yeah.
would be easier. Yeah.
So how can we, I know we'll have to eagerly wait for your book and things like that,
Yep.
but are there any snippets that people could go, okay, right, I know there's the emotional component. How can I manage? Is there a strategy that people can do to work through that to help them?
Okay. Obviously, I'm going to solve all the world's problems on the mental load. Wink, wink, napkin.
Yeah.
With my new book, I will offer a solution. I promise you this. But I think one of the things I think is true is that part of it is that you don't know it. Like, I think the first solution is educative. And I've worked with a lot of women founders who are really trying to tackle this issue. And one of the issues that I keep hearing from them, they keep hitting up against is like, people, there's an educated part, right? People don't really totally understand what is the mental load and why it's
Mm.
important. And I think this is why maybe a lot of women feel frustrated or irritated and they're having a hard time having that communication with their partners, in part because we don't yet have the language to quite articulate and explain it. Right. And
We
so,
can't put in a nice little neat box and wrap it up and say, oh, here we go. This is what we're talking about.
exactly. And so, because of that, I think that there's no silver bullet. And I like, unfortunately, there's no silver bullet. But what there are like, there are going to be certain solutions that I think will help different elements of it. So, for example, Verity Tuck is a woman founder here in Australia. She started this app called Goldie, and
Mm.
I am very interested in this. I've connected in with her because I was there writing my book, and I was writing. The thing is we have generative AI that can read our emails about and remind us that we haven't paid a bill. Why can't they do the same thing for our children, right? Like our school letters and our, one of the things we heard was like school correspondence. Man, that is
Oh,
like
geez, that's exhausting. Yes.
thinking parents, right? Like an absolute weight. And here's Goldie that's doing that, right? Like here is this app that's trying to actually use generative AI to help you take a photo of the invitation to the birthday party or read the school correspondence to pick out the key bits. And so again, is this going to solve the mental load for people? No. Like, are the fair play cards going to solve the mental load for people?
No.
Probably not, but it's one solution. Like, you'll need to know, what do you need? There are good solutions for very specific problems or issues or challenges associated with the mental load. And so that's, I think, kind of the answer. I'll just say one last thing in case your listeners are interested and anyone wants to give me $3 million to do. Well, not really. Maybe just one. I try to get Gates Foundation money to do this, but one of the things I'm trying to understand is how do people create solutions, right? Because the mental load isn't static. It fluctuates. It varies across the day. It varies across time. It depends if your parents are ill, you're going to have a different mental load than if your child, you just had a baby, if your child, like there's these kind of peaks and troughs. And so how do you actually give people cash? I ran a little pilot study where I just actually gave women money to lighten their mental load. Like, what would you spend it on? What would you do? How would you,
Yeah.
right? I'm unsolicited, just here's $100 a week and your only purpose is to lighten the mental load. That's what I want you to do. I think some of this is we need a little bit slightly more creative solutions as we talk through these problems because there's no single solution to the mental load. And actually everyone's mental load will have a different composite and your mental load will look very different today versus 6 months from now versus 5 years from now. And how do you make sure that actually workplaces are having the right conversations around this? They're understanding the value of understanding the mental load. And then they're understanding the value of tailoring solutions to help people lighten it, because people are bringing their mental load everywhere they go. It's coming with you to work. It's coming with you on a walk. It's coming with you onto the bath. You don't bring your kids to work necessarily. You don't bring your dirty dishes, but you bring your mental load everywhere. And so there is an interest in understanding it and supporting people. And unfortunately, because it's so complex, there's no one single solution.
No,
And that's
it's
going to be the hard part.
yeah. But I think also what you just said there, it's something's unique for every individual. So what my mental load is going to be completely different to yours to an extent, and the different stages of life. But I think, as you said, the first part about being education based, of actually accepting and look, this is what we're talking about, and the awareness, I think, is really powerful. But also then the acceptance. And there's so much that we can, do the scrolling and like, oh my goodness, that's what they're doing and things like that. No, they've employed one strategy, but it doesn't necessarily mean that may work for you and your partner and your husband and things like that. It's almost like a bit of a toolbox. You're like, right,
Exactly.
I'm going to bring out one strategy today. Tomorrow it's going to be different. It's not going to be a one size fits all approach. But I think, as what you said earlier, the cognitive and the emotional component, you're like, okay, I might be able to work on the cognitive part. And there's obviously then other emotional strategies that you might be able to then put into play, but it's going to be a bit of a patchwork, and probably
Correct.
changing day to day and scenario to scenario as well.
Absolutely. And that's one of my goals, is to how do as I was doing the pilot, women would be like, tell me what to do. What have other women done that works? And it's like, I don't have the answer to that. So my goal would be to create that Rolodex, right?
Mm.
Where you can go, oh, okay, well, hey, that's actually what I need right now. Or maybe, like, actually, this is the piece of it that's actually really draining me right now. So how do I retrofit a solution into that? And that might work today, but it might not work tomorrow. And then you're, you're able to see that a little bit more fluidly and flexibly. If there's something else to you about that, but yeah, I can't remember. So I'll let that
If
linger for
when
you
it
all.
comes back to, because I
I'll
know
come
from
back
a
in.
yeah, even from a personal perspective, I remember the first time we had a cleaner in. And it was amazing, the emotional part that, like, literally I could physically feel the tension and the release of the cleaners going around the house. I had a young child. I think my son was only maybe 6 or 12 months old at the time. And I was like, I feeling this emotional just energy leave my body relating to
Mhm.
cleaning. And I've never had a physical response to something like that before. But as what you say, that when you've got that emotional component, I used the cognitive part to organize a cleaner, and there was an emotional response of like,
Yeah.
I literally felt lighter in myself by after they'd left.
Yeah. And if we focus only on if we think of the mental load only as a cognitive piece, like, it's going to solve this. And it's not a solution, right? But it'll solve this piece of it. So when you said, like, oh, that
Mm.
was like cognitive decision that lightened my mental load, in part because it removed whatever, the guilt, the anxiety, the stress about feeling like you're living in a dirty house, which everyone lives in, to be honest with
Yes.
you, especially with children. But having that responsibility abdicated to someone else has this emotional release is incredible. And for some people, it might be something like having, parents come out and help and
Mm.
support. And it might be different and for others, it might not be ever having your
Yeah.
parents come out and support. But that's where I think, if we keep focusing on this is where I think workplaces really have a role. And I would like to help them understand that about, if you have these policies where everyone gets the same thing, it's not going to work. And the truth of the matter is that the men are carrying a mental load too. It just
Mm.
looks different to the women. So everyone needs some sort of support on this. It just, the solutions will vary.
Yeah. And
And
everyone
so,
always looks to the women to actually have the solution and things like that. But I know even there's times with me, like my mother-in-law might say, oh, this with the kids or something. I'm like, no, like, speak to like my husband about the Christmas gifts or something like that. Like, try and do it. On that, do you think that there's a gender equality element as well with the mental load? Because there's elements of me, I'm like, if we can then share the mental, like, I guess some of that cognitive part at home, then it also then translates into the workplace as well. And is there, probably from your research, are we seeing a shift in terms of the gender balance around this? Because I know obviously, as what we spoke about, and you said that 70-40 shift earlier.
yeah, yes and no. Like, I know I want a good news story, but
It's all
yes,
right.
yes,
I'm
yeah, no,
validating.
yes and no. But pretty consistently, women are carrying a heavier load across the research that has been done to date. But that said, we're working on a paper right now where it's like, what we hear from the dads is actually that they're kind of employing two strategies, right? They're either they want to have more time with their kids. I mean, there's all this research showing that like fathers want to engage in these new fatherhood norms. They want to be more emotionally connected to their children. They want to be different dads to their dads, like that fatherhood is actually really important to them. And the challenge is, how do you do that when there's still this expectation that they're supposed to be the primary earners, that they're supposed to be the breadwinners? And we can hear that in the interviews, which is like, they love the experience of being able to be co-present with their children, to be emotionally connected, not just like what they talk about. I don't want to be like what my dad was, where he was just sitting there quiet, didn't do anything, and, couldn't make a sandwich. I want to be there. I want to hear my children's emotions, but how do I do this in a way that allows me to still engage with my workplace? And they talk
Mm.
about this idea of like compartmentalization. I'm either going to compartmentalize and work is here and home is here, or I'm going to bring these two things together. And they spend a lot of their mental load thinking about, am I doing it right? Am I achieving what I want to do? Am I getting work-life balance? We hear this all the time, and then this mental load around work-life balance. And it's funny because mothers don't necessarily talk about that. They don't expect their work and life to be imbalanced.
I actually
They
don't like the statement.
right.
I really don't like it. I find it like is work-life integration because I don't think they're mutually exclusive. For me, it's a bit of a Venn diagram. When so many people say, do you want work-life balance? I'm like, I've never been balanced on a seesaw. I've never balanced in anything. Like if I tried, I'm like, I
Uh-huh.
just, yeah. So for me, it's a bit like a swear word of, I'm like, yeah, sorry, I'm about work-life integration. I'll get off my soapbox now.
I don't know. I'm with you. I'm with you on that too. And in part because your career and your fertility are all peaking at the same time, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, girl, I'm with you. The challenge is that the men are still thinking about they're going to get it. I think the men are often thinking about
Yeah.
how to get it in balance. I think the women are like, yeah, balance is not feasible. How am I here and making it integrate so we can
Yeah.
survive?
We need to
And
integrate.
right, like, but the men are like, how do I give more to my family and still appear serious about my job,
Mm.
or maybe less serious about my job but give more to my family? And so that's kind of so the one I think things are changing. Like the short answer is yes, they are. We have research projects that show, men today are generationally men are picking up more of the housework and childcare, but women are still holding this higher amount and they haven't really changed generationally. And then with the mental load, like part of it again is I don't think we have the right language yet to understand what's going on. And when I would do the interviews and I would start to say like, okay, but you're doing this piece, but there's all these other pieces. Are you doing that? Oh, I didn't even know. Right. Like it's kind of this lack of awareness. And so I think that education piece becomes even more critical because once you know, you can share. Once you
Yeah.
know, you can think about it. Once
And
you
you can
know, you
name
can
it.
be aware. Otherwise, it's like all this stuff that's happening around you that you don't know how it's happening. You just know when it's not happening because things fall apart, right?
Mm.
Like there's all this, it's almost like a ballet happening, but you don't know you're in it
Yeah.
until someone's out. So my short answer is like, yes, I think there's an opportunity and there is an opportunity. I think men are keen, men are interested, fathers want to be there with their kids. It's just, we have to give them as well the tools to figure out how to do that. And sometimes women have to step out a little bit and let it all fall apart.
Yes. Look after yourself for a moment and fill your cup and things like that.
Yeah. I'll let that sit in.
Yeah. Are there strategies that women can employ, I guess, to step out and watch the cards fall over a little bit to let maybe their
That's like,
partners or husbands? Because I know sometimes they might go, oh, I don't have to do this. And oh no, I actually now need to step up. Or probably also, I know that there's you know this better, some of the research around that if men are taking parental leave and extended parental leave, that they're actually more engaged in understanding, I guess, the running of a household than those men that unfortunately have not had the opportunity or haven't been able to.
yeah, absolutely. So giving men opportunities to care, to
Mm.
step into the care and without punishment too, right? Like without women too. Let me be clear on that. Like women too. Women should
Yeah.
be able to step out to care without an expectation of penalty. But of course, we have these social norms that say like, oh yeah, of course mothers are going to step out for a period of time to care for their children. but the fathers, no, we got to change that in terms of encouraging men to step in to the care, right? Like that. I think that is a very critical piece, but always as individualizing what is a structural problem. Like, and it's hard to say, yes, of course. And of course, women need to do less and men need to do more. And we need to shift a little bit our expectations. And I think you can do that in the immediate. You can. I was just interviewed the other day for ABC, and this one of the reporters is doing this article on like these women are taking vacations or sabbaticals from their family.
I
Right?
read
Like,
about this today. I know one of the women that was interviewed.
oh,
Yeah.
really? Tell me
Yeah.
more. I was like, good. I was like, yeah. And it's hard for women to step past the guilt about this. Like, yes, yes, recharge, step out, and be someplace where you don't see anything that you're responsible for. Go to a hotel where if things are broken, you don't care.
Yeah.
Eat the takeaway in the bed and spill on the sheets. You're not cleaning them. That is like so critical. What did the person that that is your friend? What do you know?
Yeah, I know. Actually, through some of the working mama stuff. Yeah, she went to Vietnam on her own and has then written for it. So I actually haven't read the article yet, but I just read her post literally today on LinkedIn about it. And she said that I was like, and so there was a mum that took a year off. I'm like, wow, like kudos. Like I personally couldn't do it. But having said that, I've actually just been away for a week overseas with work. And so no family on an international flight on my own. And I was actually sitting at one leg next to a mum and her two kids. And I was like, you traveled really well, and giving kudos to her. So, yeah.
What, you have your noise canceling
Yes,
headphones
I
on.
did.
It's like, you're doing a great job here, but hold on. I'm in some stuff
Yes.
binging something. Yeah, absolutely. Like a little bit normalizing that so that, but yeah, I've been interviewed a lot over the years about this, like about the guilt women feel about doing this. Like, yeah, go normalize it.
I've had so many people say to me, like, whenever I've traveled with work, oh my God, who's looking after the kids? Is your husband going to be okay? And things like that. And even people will say it to my husband, are you going to be all right? And he's like, yeah, I'm their father. I'm going to be okay.
Exactly.
Like, I know. Yeah. And I think the first time I traveled, my son was 14 months old or something. Everyone's like, oh my goodness, you're leaving him. And there was so much guilt that's put on it. And even a couple of weeks ago, I had someone say to me, oh, you traveled last week, Karina, and you're traveling again this week. You leaving the family. And I'm thinking, you've got kids as well. No one's turning around to you and saying, oh, well done for you. You're traveling. So it's really interesting, the mum guilt that people will put on you just for living life at times.
Yeah, Wendy Tui just wrote a great article in The Age this week where we were talking about it too. And I said to her, like, we have this expectation that mothers are solely responsible for everything with their children, like that no one can step in and the whole thing is on their shoulders. But if dads are taking work trips, no one's saying that they don't get that conversation would be happening, right? It'd be like, oh, good, you're investing in your career to try to build more for your family. Good job.
Yeah. But then to women, it's completely different. It's like the mum guilt of, oh my goodness. And there's a lot of media obviously going on around about childcare as we're recording this and what the systems and structures are around it. Obviously what Wendy's article was around, which was a great article. And it's interesting as well, then the mum guilt that is coming into the conversation of, oh, should women actually be working and then staying home longer and for parental leave? And I actually saw someone on a comment the other day saying, I actually wanted to go back to work. And I'm the same. And I think I've commented on a few things. I've gone, I need to work. I'm not someone that could do it 24/7. And I'm kudos to those stay-at-home mums, which I think is a much harder job than actually working as well. But as it probably comes back as well to what we were saying earlier, everyone has a different reason and a different circumstance. But it's funny how we'll put guilt onto each other for actually what we want to do in ourselves. But where does this guilt as well come from?
It's interesting too, because I always think if you're pointing at the individual, you're never looking at the structure. If you're saying like,
Oh, I love that.
you're saying you should feel guilty for doing this, like instead of saying, how do we create childcare systems that actually work for people and that are safe, affordable, right? Like how do we create workplaces that actually allow people to access remote and flexible work? That if you can't access remote and flexible work because you have to do your job physically somewhere, how do you give people different resources, schedule control, an ability to set the pace and tempo of their time, right? Like this can all look in different ways. How do we make sure that fathers actually can get parental leave or take paid leave out? or reduce their work time down or take days off for the sick kids without actually coming back around and punishing them. But if we spend our whole time, if instead we're focused on each other and naming and shaming each other to try to make us as individuals feel guilty for that, then we're really having the wrong conversation. We're looking in the wrong direction when in fact the answer should always be, this is hard for all of us. And so how do we work together to create a system that works for all of us? For all of us? I think a lot about this because I think about how do you have kind of two problems going simultaneously. Like you have a caregiving problem that's happening at both ends of the age distribution, the
Yeah.
older age people and younger age people. And how do you integrate that? How do you take the fact that we've like totally demolished community and said to people, the minute you have a care demand, you're supposed to deal with that totally alone in your
Yeah.
home. You have a baby and you're sent home to be isolated. We've eroded our community connections when we have a lot of people who are sitting in houses alone, caring for others when we should care within the community. So this is my long way of saying, I think we're often that's a very simple way to get people focused on the wrong thing. And if we can kind of break some of that, maybe we can start focusing on the things that actually could really make the systems better, make sure that men have access to care, make sure that women have access to care and work, right? Create open opportunities. And I think that's ultimately the goal. But if people are overwhelmed and they're tired and you're telling them that they suck because they went on a work trip, they don't have the energy. They don't have the mental capacity, right, to be thinking about those bigger issues. And so
No.
that's part of my goal and dream too, is how do you remove some of that space so that we can start really tackling the big problems that we have ahead of us in a way
Yeah.
that works for everybody.
Yeah. And it's not a one size fits all. And it's what we say, like some of this is all, oh no, it's a woman's issue or it's that. It's not. It's both. And if we talk, I think also then some of this then lends into gender balance in the workplace and things like that as well, because the more that we can actually support both parents and then living by the values and things like that, that they actually want to particularly raise their children in, and that, because we know that generally when women are going on maternity leave, they may not then come back to the workplace full time. But as we think, like part-time doesn't mean that they're part-time committed. Like they're probably even actually, I know in myself, probably more committed than if I was working full-time, and not probably even when I was working full-time before kids, I'm probably more focused in on what I'm doing now than pre-kids. But it's also about creating those systems and structures to support both parents and not actually let women go, oh, you should feel guilty. But what about the kids and things like that? Because kids don't need you just when they're 1. They also need you when they're 10, when they're 15, when they're 18, just in a different, probably physical as well as an emotional way. But it's the patriarchal systems is what we often refer to, of kids, of women being, oh no, your role in life and society is just to raise kids. Well, it's one part of it, not the whole picture.
And kids don't just need just one person, right?
No,
Or
it's a
2
village.
people.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, it's interesting because we have a parenting work skills certificate, which is helping people understand how parenting helps you build through lived experience. Actually, you bring back skills to your workplace. It's career enhancing, right? That transition into parenthood. And anyone who's had that transition knows, like, you come back changed. You come back more empathetic. You come back with better time management. You come back more focused. And so when you said that, actually, there's all this research that shows that parents actually in that transition are actually better workers. They're more dedicated. They're more focused. They're more committed to the organization, right? They're more empathetic. And that is something we miss. And often people drop down to part-time work because it's hard to make it all integrate. But part-time work is very rarely part-time. And that sometimes I think can be a real trap for mothers and women too, right? Is you're half the pay, but it's very rarely half the time, energy, and work. And so I think that's a little bit tricky too, in terms of it's one solution. And I'm not saying you shouldn't choose the solution, but be mindful that often you cut your salary, but you don't necessarily, and you maybe cut your hours, but you don't necessarily cut the work in half. And so sometimes staying full time or something close to that, but just maybe being a little less productive than you could be, you might find that actually what you're doing on that part-time is actually what you could do in the full time. And so I think it's important. My goal is always for women to make decisions with their eyes wide open, right? Armed with the best resources, armed with the best research, and knowing, that there is research showing part-time work is not part-time.
Nah,
And sometimes
100%.
it can intensify the stress that's happening in between work and family. Because now you're
Yeah.
responsible 100% for what happens at work and 100% for what happens at home because now you're the part-time or primary carer. So just
Yeah.
be warned.
Yes. Watch that. Watch that. Gee, I know we're talking a lot about the mental load and things like that, but for women that do feel that guilt and things like that, because it's something that's really going through a lot of people I know at different stages of being a mum. With a study of saying, I think it was like 98% of women experience mum guilt, which I'd love to meet the 2% of women that actually have never experienced guilt. I never thought that was possible. What can we do about it? Do you have any strategies that you work through around managing the guilt? And I guess some of those, I know it also comes down to mindset and the stories that we tell ourselves.
And I never usually, okay, I don't want to say I'm in the 2%, but I don't often feel guilty. I guess I am the unicorn. My really good friend, Katie Collins, has this book called Making Motherhood Work. And what she finds essentially, she doesn't study Australia, but she looks at the US, Sweden, Italy, and maybe one other country. And she finds that guilt is very much a US and I think an Australian based phenomenon.
So very
That,
Western culture.
yeah, or yes. And so I think it's a very individualized culture, right? About guilt,
Yeah.
that notion of guilt. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that it doesn't have to go synonymously between motherhood and guilt, that there are countries where mothers can work and not actually feel guilty. And we can look
Mm.
to in this book, in the Swedish comparative in that book that basically shows that like guilt is not the piece of it, right? Maybe time stressed, time poor, but guilt, no. Because being a good mother is being a mother who cares, who works and puts her child into childcare and has time, right? It's not an either or logic. We very much have an either or logic and then a very deep shame about if you make the wrong, I'm putting that in quotes for those of you who are listening, the wrong decision. There's a huge amount of pressure on parents, but mothers specifically, to be the perfect parent because you have to set your kid up for the future. And the future is uncertain. And if you do anything wrong, again, I'm not saying this is the internal voice.
Yeah.
If you do anything wrong, wow, your kid's not going to have have, a job and they're not going to be able to be employed enough to make a high enough living. And Melissa Milky calls this we're responsible for safeguarding our children's futures when in fact
Mm.
you can't predict things like rising inflation. You can't predict global warming, globalization, COVID-19, but yet somehow we as parents or we as mothers are supposed to be able to safeguard our children against that. And when I say that to you, you probably are like, well, that feels like it's like an
I'm like,
impossible
yep, I've
job.
definitely thought about that of how do I protect them? And I'm going to stuff them up at some point, but how
Yeah.
can I stuff them up the least amount?
Yeah. A lot of pressure to put on one person.
Yeah. I even know as a mother of two boys that I feel like there's a lot of pressure to try and raise thoughtful,
Yeah.
considerate, respectful boys. And I find that even of that, and who's putting that on that? Me. So yeah.
Yeah. So I think there is, I guess, saying, hey, there's another way. It doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't make you a bad mom, actually. It makes you a very good mom, right? It doesn't have to be reflexive. You're not the only one responsible. So I think kind of highlighting some of that of like, it's a lot of pressure to put on one person. And
Yeah.
people in other countries don't do that. Like that mothers in other countries don't feel that way. So
It's really
what's
interesting.
going on
Yeah.
here?
I know it's really interesting you say Sweden. I guess we always look to Sweden and the research, and they've actually got pretty good parental leave, and we know that better gender equality happening over there. So it's interesting about how some of those, I guess, societal norms then translate into some of that guilt. And I guess probably the messages that are coming out from those societies are probably not as harsh and critical of one particular gender over the other.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you live in a country where you are told you are solely responsible for pulling yourself up,
Mm.
and yet you don't have things like, a childcare system that is affordable or parental leave that, or if there's an expectation that you're supposed to be at work for long hours, but you don't have access to flexible work, rising cost of living, like again, it's, of course you feel guilty or shame because you're trying to solve this. You keep coming up, it's like swimming against the
The
current,
tide,
right?
yeah.
And then you're being told like, well, why didn't you make it? Why didn't you
Yeah, like
swim faster? Again, I think individuals have responsibility on some things, right? And I think it's easy for us to say, oh, fix the structure, but don't fix the women. I believe that, but I think you need individual solutions right now because it's, but also to say, what would happen if we had a little bit more space, time, and energy and we could start breathing and taking some space and actually seeing what's happening around us and then maybe coming together and figuring out how to fix it so
Yeah.
that the next generation of women don't have to do the same.
No, and I think it's
Or men.
obviously yeah, exactly. There's a lot of glass ceiling and things like that. There's a lot of glass segments that hopefully are on the ground as we're breaking that. So if we had to sort of create those structures for the next generation, what would they then look like?
God, how much time do we have? I think you need a robust care infrastructure. We need to think about caregiving like we think about internet. Do we have it? Do we have water? Right? Like, do
The
we have
Maslow's
caregiving?
hierarchy of needs. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Like we invest a huge amount of money into our bridges, billions of dollars into a tunnel that went to nowhere. And so why are those same investments not being made to make sure that we have effective care infrastructure? I wrote this article, like a think piece following the COVID pandemic where, people were fleeing the city, there was this discussion about what's going to happen to our cities. And it's like, why are we not better using these opportunities to better integrate care infrastructure? I mean, like the physical spaces, right? There have been did this great, a couple of years ago, this great thing about childcare deserts, like,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
again, if we're thinking that it's critical that people have access to broadband internet, why do we not think that it's critical to have access
Care.
to care,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that's and make sure that it's a well-paid job. It's not just minding children. Early childhood education and care is
Such an important job. Yeah.
and there's so much research showing like investments early on have this astronomical benefit later on.
Yeah.
So I think you need to have a little bit I think that there needs to be this tilt towards understanding the value of care, both as a infrastructure, also that when it brings your employees back to the workforce. And we're talking a lot about parents, and I know this is the purpose of the podcast, but people care in a range of different ways for their pets, for their aging parents, for friends, right? Like this assumption that, sometimes I think, because I talk a lot about this, but like, I think about, there's a lot of focus on parents, and that's not the only way people care for siblings or for everyone has to care is to be human. And how do we ensure that workplaces are including this type of dimension too, right? People are caring in diverse ways. How do we make sure that both workplaces, schools, and then our big institutions with a capital I are supporting that and putting in the infrastructure of care?
Yeah. And sometimes it's physical, but it's not always going to be physical. It's the
That's
emotional
right.
and the support structures and things like that that sit around it. And probably also then to give permission for people that, yes, it is okay to have those roles. It is okay to care. But also acknowledging these are the roles that we actually need to then function as society and things like that, children will be looking after their parents of the sandwich generation and things like
That's
that as
right.
well, that the whole system actually relies on that as well, that we can't actually dismiss it,
That's right. And then
but also acknowledge it.
auditing salaries too. I mean, I know I'm just like banging on about care infrastructure, but like even the work what Gia is doing or the auditing pay to make sure that when people step back, you need a little bit of the
You need a bit of a
incentive
push. Yes.
and then the enforcement, right? You need a little bit both coming in both ways. You need the big infrastructure investment, and then you need some sort of oversight on what's going on to make sure that it actually is people aren't being punitively treated when they step out for any type of caregiving responsibility, right? We let people step out if you're ill, you'll step out and you come back in. You don't expect to be totally punished when you come back in, right? You have a major illness, but somehow when we have a pregnancy or some exit to caregiving, we expect, oh, of course you'll be paid less and you'll drop down to part-time work and you won't be serious about work. And this is just nonsense. And of
Yeah.
course, men don't want to do that. They would never want to. What kind of man would want to care? Like this is all nonsense myths that we tell each other. That just actually make us all worse off.
Yeah. Why would men possibly want to take, time out to get a minimum wage potentially only now just super paid into their accounts? Oh no, I've seen what penalties have come from other men that have taken out, or I've seen what's happened to women. Why should I then take a back seat and things like that? No, it's my role, the patriarchal society, that the breadwinner and things like that. When, as you say, it's changing the narrative, but also then the acceptance that sits in behind that, as you see in Sweden and a lot of European countries, oh no, it's okay. You can both parents can do it, but also it's accepted that, there's that flexibility as well.
Yeah, and the other thing, I know we're probably coming up on time, but I feel bad about this, but I'll keep going. The other thing is like the lies Australians tell each other about this is not actually a traditional society. Like it's not actually a breadwinning society. This is a dual earner country where most people have both people working, right? Like
And it's
the
changed
days,
and that's increased so much in the last few years, but we like to
yes,
think that it's unique.
yeah. There's days of like there's one breadwinner and then there's a homemaker, and that's who we are as traditional roots. Man, that's not true anymore. Like that's not who you are.
It's
We
changed a
are
lot in the
not that
last 30
country.
years. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an unhelpful narrative, social norm, expectation that people are trying to benchmark themselves against this ideal. But it was a weird anomaly in a period of time, historical period of time, and actually most of history, both men and women worked.
Yeah, because women then back in the day, I guess the 100, 200 years ago, were working in the village. They were then not
That's
being
right.
around 24/7 and things like that. Whereas now there's this notion that women need to be around and caring for their kids, and that's all you do and focus on and things like that. But also, as you say, there is the research by, like the Parenthood and Thrive by Five of
That's right.
actually the socialization of kids and the education and the skills and things like that, that the kids are learning more there than what they are in the home. And I know a lot of people will say, oh, well, it's just babysitting. And I can personally say that, no, my kids have learned a lot. The other day, my son's counting numbers and he was identifying the numbers and he's in kinder and he's 4. And I'm going, how did you know
Sure.
that? And he goes, oh, no, Kelly told me. I'm going, oh, good to know, because I didn't tell you.
Yeah. This is all valuable work.
And it's all
But
the
we
village,
think
as what you say. It's not just
that's
one
right.
person that's having an influence on our children. And even, they say it takes a village to raise a family, but I think it's also a village to help raise the entire family with both parents and things like that. I know we're almost, I could keep talking to you on this for
I know,
pages.
we're going to go on for hours, and then you're listening. You're going to be like, okay, girl.
Oh my
stop.
God. Oh my God.
Slow
Okay.
down.
Is there anything else? I know there'd be a lot, but is there like the top 1 or 2 things that you would just like, okay, it's just a final thought on mental load, mum guilt, and everything else?
Just be a little bit easier on yourselves. You're in these systems that actually are setting you up to feel terrible. But if we take a step back, we can add a little bit more joy into all of it. A little bit like it's not your fault, right? Like you're in the system that is designed to feel hard. And if you're in the system and it's feeling hard, you're not doing it wrong. It's because the system is designed to not make this easy on you. And so
It's
maybe
the system,
just
not you.
that's right. Like please don't feel bad. I see you. I understand. And I'm like with you. And this is hard. It's hard under normal circumstances. And then it's even harder in the current moment in the current system. So
Yeah.
it's not a personal feeling. That's, I think,
No.
what I'm with.
Amazing. Amazing.
And you're
Okay.
doing a great job. And you're doing a great job. It's not a personal feeling. And you're doing a great job.
Exactly.
Under very difficult circumstances.
You're rocking it. You're rocking. Okay. So what, I ask this of every guest, Leah, what do you do to fill your cup?
Oh, God. A lot of laughing with friends. A lot of getting into a bath. And then a lot of taking time away alone. I don't know, either walking or a little work trips, right? So things that I need a lot of downtime without my family even breathing in the same household. I don't want to hear anything. I don't want to hear the breathing. None of it. I'm gone. That's my cup filling.
Oh, fantastic. And fantastic. Now, how can people connect with you, find out more about your research, potentially about your book in the future?
Okay, thank you very much. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's where that's where I'm having the greatest conversations at this moment in time. My email is publicly available, fortunately for you, and sometimes unfortunately for me. And then please listen to the podcast if you can. We're trying to have these conversations and across multiple different topics. So I would love any listens from your listeners, and that would be wonderful. And then the book's coming out next year. So look for this face on Oprah.
Oh my goodness. Amazing.
I don't know if that'll happen. That's
Well,
aspirational.
you gotta aim high. So you never know.
Thank you.
She
I'm
loves these kind of
manifesting.
topics. Yes, you got to
Manifesting.
manifest it right. Okay, just quickly, your podcast is called Misperceived.
Yeah, misperceived. MISS, like, this got named when I was on the radio once talking to some, and the listeners called in and named it. They're like, "You should call it misperceived." And then they had a great idea, and I did. So MISS, perceived.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Leah, for this just amazing chat. It's been so good. We've bounced around on so many different topics, but really keep doing the amazing work and the advocacy in this space really to support so many women and even parents as well. I know that I've followed your work for a number of years, and just I think on behalf of everyone, we can also say thank you because you're flying the flag to support us and no doubt forging the path to help us through it. So really appreciate it. Thank you.
I love you and thank you.